welcome everybody. I need to take a minute and kind of reflect, as a few years ago we had one of our first meetups in San Francisco, and I drove up. I live down near Stanford, and I think there were about 20 people in attendance that night, and I think I'm rounding up, and I think half of them were there for the free food and the free beer, and we had some of our early adopters like Justin at Helicone, or Ting at Time Plus, or Noah at Sewer AI. I don't know if you're in the room here present. Lukas from Weights and Biases, some of our early adopters. And here we are, hundreds of people in the room, just a few years later, so it's just really a testament to the community and the growth and the adoption, so thank you very much for joining us. We put today together as a bit of a test. You know, we are a global company. Over half of our customers are outside of the United States. Over half of our employees are outside of the United States, and we're going to try to replicate this in the next set of markets that we look to enter. So we appreciate your feedback. We spent a lot of time putting together the program for today and the content. We flew a lot of people in from Asia and Europe, experts in ClickHouse. So hopefully you can walk away today more informed so that you can take that back to your companies and to your customers and deliver more value than you already are using ClickHouse. I first discovered ClickHouse probably 5 years ago in the context of logging. At my previous employer, we started to see a number of companies migrate to ClickHouse. It was an open source project, and it just kind of emerged on the scene. And I thought I'd start today by trying to make this a little bit interactive to try to get a sense of what use cases are reflected. What I discovered, over the course of time is that ClickHouse satisfies a lot of diverse sets of use cases. And I'd be curious to know what the room represents in terms of how you're either using the technology or how you're thinking about using the technology. So if you wouldn't mind humoring me and getting out your phone and scanning that QR code, it should pop up a survey. While you do that, I'm going to take a picture with these new Meta glasses. These were given to me as a gift last week, and I never thought I'd use them, but they've got a couple great use cases. Playing music, like in the background when nobody knows, is one of them. But if you haven't tried these, it's great. Okay, so, trying to distill all these use cases down to a few has been difficult, so these are the 4 that we've come up with. I suspect these will evolve over time. So real-time analytics, that could be customer-facing. It could be for internal use. Data warehousing, so this could be as an alternative to something like BigQuery or Redshift or Snowflake or Databricks. Observability, which is where I first discovered ClickHouse, or an AI or ML workload. So interesting. It's over 2/3 for real-time analytics, which is really where ClickHouse shines in terms of performance. Okay, we've got a few more of these this morning, so if you want to keep your phones out, thanks for participating. So I mentioned the kind of international mix of the company. We're a 4-year-old company, a little less than 4 years old. We've got about 300 employees around the world. As I mentioned, over half of those are outside of the United States. I had the good fortune of meeting Alexey Milovidov, the creator of ClickHouse, a little over 4 years ago, and we basically he was at Yandex, and he authored ClickHouse. He named it. ClickHouse is short for Clickstream Data Warehouse, ClickHouse. So Alexey was thinking about the data warehouse use case long before the industry was. And we just started to kind of romanticize about building a company together. And the courtship took almost a year. And during the course of that, I said, Alexey, what do you think about bringing in a third co-founder to start the company? And I said, I've got somebody in mind. He's an individual who I met when he was at Netflix running platform engineering. He led Netflix's migration to the cloud. At the time, he was AWS's largest customer. And so I reached out to Yury. He had since left Netflix and gone to Google, where he was running their serverless products and the cloud console and dev tooling. And I said, Yury, I'm going to start a company with Alexey around ClickHouse. Would you like to join us? And so Yury said, this sounds perfect. It actually wasn't his first response. His first response was a little bit different. But selling starts with no. And so I went to work and convinced Yury that it was a perfect time in his career in his mid-40s to start a company. We kind of bring the average age up in terms of tech founders. So anyway, that's the 3 of us. You're going to hear from Yury and Alexey here shortly, and Tanya and others who have joined the fun. So here's the journey that the technology's been on since Alexey created ClickHouse and wrote the first few lines of code. And you can see it was open sourced in 2016. Myself, Tanya, and others discovered it a few years later, and we formed a company around it. And venture-backed startup, well capitalized back in 2021. We announced a new funding round this morning, just to make sure that we can kind of secure the future of the company and make sure that we continue to innovate and invest heavily in R&D. And we launched our cloud service, ClickHouse Cloud, and we're going to try to get a poll of who may be using that cloud service 2.5 years ago. And originally on AWS, and then subsequently on GCP, and then on Azure. And then earlier this year, we launched a deployment model called Bring Your Own Cloud, where we decouple the data plane from the control plane. And we've got some early adopters in the room here today. And we've got some other deployment options that we're going to be rolling out later this year that you're going to hear about it. We've acquired a few companies that are complementary to ClickHouse, so specifically PeerDB, which developed a CDC protocol for getting data out of Postgres and into ClickHouse. Earlier this year, we acquired HyperDX, which had built a visualization layer. You'll hear from Mike later today. We acquired Archetype, which is now our SQL editor. And then CHDB, which is more of a local in-memory data processor built on ClickHouse. So this is the journey that we've been on. We've been moving pretty quickly. We just passed 2,000 customers on our cloud service. And so I would be curious to know in the room today, what is your primary deployment model? If you're using ClickHouse today, or even if you're considering using ClickHouse, how are you planning on deploy this? Through ClickHouse Cloud, our multi-tenant SaaS service, self-managing ClickHouse, the open source distribution. And maybe you're here, you're not using ClickHouse, but you want to explore it. Okay, so over half of the audience is using the managed service. That's great. So what does this look like since we launched the service? And this is just a kind of representative sampling of some of our more prominent early adopters who have really tested us in terms of designing the feature set. And it's gone up and to the right very quickly, which has been a great test for our company in terms of how do we onboard and how do we support such a diverse customer base around the world. And so we're grateful for those of you who have bet on us early and helped us get to where we are. But I'd be also curious to see what your infrastructure platform of choice is. And then I'll let you know what the distribution is for our customers and see if it maps to the people in the room. On-prem. A quarter of the room is running on-prem. Here we go. We're back to on-prem software. It's kind of startling, actually. We are seeing this shift to workloads being run back on-prem from the public cloud, and we're going to talk a bit about how we're going to support those deployments. We've done it with a few early adopters, and we think we're going to see more of that over time, and Yury can talk about his experience in the pros and cons of both. All right, so AWS is over half. It's interesting. So in terms of the distribution of our cloud customers, those 2,000 customers that I talked about. Hey, Faye. You come from Beijing? From Hangzhou. That's really impressive. You've got to earn the farthest traveled for today, from Hangzhou, China. You're welcome, Faye. So Faye, I actually didn't know you were coming, manages our partnership with Alibaba in China. So we obviously don't operate our cloud service in mainland China, so we partnered with Alibaba Cloud, and they redistribute our cloud binary for their enterprise offering for their customers. It's great to see you. Thanks for flying out. So of those 2,000 customers, over 70% are on AWS, and then over 20% are on Google Cloud, and then the remaining would be on Azure. So not necessarily the same sampling in the room today. Okay, so I'd love to invite on stage Alexey, who I've credentialed, and is going to take the presentation from here. And I guess to start, I'm going to ask Alexey a question. So you designed this technology, you then made the choice to open source it, which is not an easy choice to make under an Apache 2 license, which is still the license which governs the project back in 2016. If you take a look at the popularity of the technology, is this what you anticipated? What were some of the design principles that you kept in mind? And how are you thinking about the future of the project?
This is not what I anticipated initially, but I saw that ClickHouse takes and implements a technology for a specific niche that has no solutions yet. And open sourcing is a chance to show this technology to all the world, so everyone can judge on their own what ClickHouse can do. Everyone can spread the word. So here we are. It definitely exceeded my expectations. Thank you, Aaron, for introduction. So let me show you a few ClickHouse features. So as you know, ClickHouse is a very powerful database. It has a lot of stuff. And I'm not going to list all of these items. It could be quite boring. But you might be wondering, what is my favorite feature? And it is very difficult to answer this question because I cannot select a single favorite feature. All of these are my favorite. Some of these I implemented by myself, and they are especially favorite to me. Some of them I use every day, and they are also my favorite features. But let me choose just a few of them. So the first one is about the new data type in ClickHouse, the JSON data type. It implements support for semi-structured data, and it makes it as efficient as if you analyzed the structure and specified all the columns and all the types in advance. But now you don't have to do it. You just write your table with a JSON column, and it does everything automatically. And I think that this feature opens a new product capability, a new possibility for you. Because until recently, it was I could not even imagine that it is possible. And now ClickHouse is the best analytical database capable of processing semi-structured data. So everything like logs, API responses. OK, this is one of my favorite. What else? What is this? This is about query optimizations. And for queries that might be not written by you. I know that you are ClickHouse experts, and you write good, well-optimized queries. But what if some queries are written by business intelligence systems, or better, AI agents? What if you ask AI agent to write a query, and it writes a query with 20 tables joined together? And we have to support all these queries. We have to optimize these queries. And it is a never-ending task. So all of these items make it possible. Specific optimizations for joins, for correlated subqueries, different ways of decorrelation. Now everything is supported by ClickHouse, and you will hear more about it during today's sessions. What else? About open table formats. You know that ClickHouse already has an open table format, merge tree, which is the best format. If you have your data, the best way is just to store it in merge tree table. But also we care about interoperability with different open formats. And this is not only about Parquet, it is boring, it is also about data lakes, such as Iceberg, Delta Lake, and even Apache Hudi. And now we have support for all of them. And we also have to support all open data catalogs, such as REST, Unity, and AWS Glue. And again, we have support for all of them today. And you will hear about it more during today's sessions. Now, what is probably, yes, my favorite feature? My favorite feature is actually ClickHouse Cloud. And now let me introduce my co-founder, who has 20 years of experience with cloud technologies and open source. Welcome, Yury Izrailevsky.
Yeah, isn't it amazing? Thank you, Alexey. I have over 20 years of experience, and I'm only 19 years old. So yeah, but yeah, as Alexey said, spent over 2 decades developing open source software and building cloud services on top of it. And I worked with some really successful open source projects like Linux, Hadoop, Kubernetes, Chaos Monkey, and many others. But when I first saw ClickHouse, I was completely blown away. I downloaded it on my laptop, started running some queries, and the results were coming back instantaneously. It was like magic. So I kept loading more and more data until I ran out of disk space on my laptop, and the results were still coming back right away. So I thought it was a bug. I thought it was broken. But I checked, the results were correct, and that's when I knew that this was really unique, one-of-a-kind kind of technology. So when sometime later, Aaron and Alexey reached out, and like Aaron said, yeah, at first I was a little reluctant to give up my cushy exec job at Google that gave me a lot of free time to ski. But eventually I knew I had to do it, and I never looked back. And my job was to help take this amazing open source technology and turn it into the best cloud-native SaaS product. Of course, at ClickHouse, we love our open source community. It's really the open source users and contributors that have made it the success that it is today. And of course, if you want to manage ClickHouse by yourself using the open source, all the power to you. But frankly, most people have better things to do with their time than maintaining and upgrading ClickHouse clusters. So your job is to build amazing applications on top of ClickHouse, and our job is to run ClickHouse for you. At the end of the day, open source and cloud product are not at conflict with each other. Open source provides the core database capabilities, and the popularity of this fuels a lot of demand for a cloud product. And our cloud revenue then funds more development in the open source. So the two sides, they support each other, they reinforce each other, and ultimately we end up with better open source software and better experience for our cloud customers. Of course, we live in the information age, and data is the most valuable asset of any organization. And no company is going to trust you with their data unless you can provide them with the best security, best data privacy, and with regulatory compliance. And we have a very sizable, dedicated team. Martin is right here in the audience, who runs our security team, that ensures cloud and application security and provides 24/7 incident response. Of course, we insist on all the best practices like code scanning and fuzzing and pen testing. We work with outside researchers on the bug bounty program, and we comply with all the relevant certifications, SOC 2 Type 2, PCI, ISO 2701, HIPAA, GDPR, everything out there. We guarantee functional compatibility between the open source and our cloud product. You can run the same query on both sides. But under the hood, the architecture is actually very different. In the open source, you generally run ClickHouse in a shared nothing architecture, where the data sits directly on the nodes. So if you have to resize the cluster or replace a failed node or do an upgrade, it's actually quite slow and complicated. So as a result, you typically have to over-provision your cluster for your peak load, and you have to pay for all of that infrastructure 24/7. In the cloud, we've separated compute and storage. So the data sits in shared object storage like S3 or GCS or MinIO on-prem. And the compute clusters are completely stateless. So you actually don't need to maintain any data or even metadata on the node itself in order to run the queries. And what that means is that it's actually very quick to scale the cluster up or out as your load increases. And then when the load goes down, you can scale it back down, or you can even completely idle it if you're not running any queries. And of course, you only pay for what you use. So what that means is that migrating from open source to ClickHouse to our cloud product is actually a no-brainer, because you get a better managed product, and it's actually, the total cost of ownership is cheaper as well. This cloud architecture actually enables other really interesting features, such as compute separation. So you deploy multiple compute clusters on top of the same shared object storage, and that allows you to do things like isolating reads and writes, or having different clusters representing the same data for different use cases or different cost centers, and you don't have to replicate your data, and you don't have to pay for those multiple copies. So that's just one of many interesting applications. So to tell about more, I'd like to welcome Krithika. Krithika is the Senior Director of Product Management who runs our cloud product. Krithika, Balagurunathan, welcome.
Thank you. So I joined ClickHouse 3 years back, and from the very early days of building the cloud offering, I've been around. So one of the core operating principles for us from the start was to make the service radically easy to use and scale. Whether it's handling a bursty, ad hoc workload or sustaining petabytes of ingest, the goal being the service should just adapt. While the separation of compute and storage that Yury spoke about helped in a lot of ways make this possible, that alone wasn't enough. To truly meet the needs of the diverse set of workloads that we had on the fleet, we needed to look under the hood and make some core fundamental changes to the way we orchestrate. Traditionally, in distributed systems, especially in a Kubernetes construct, when it comes to scaling, it follows a break first and then make model, whereby you're removing an old replica and then replacing it with a replica of the desired size. This often leads to disruption during the transition window, suboptimal for latency-sensitive applications, which is where we flipped it. We pivoted to a make first, then break model, whereby we add a resized replica first, ensure that it's stable, and only when it's safe to do so, evict the old replica. While it sounds simple, the amount of engineering cycles that it took to ensure that this worked at scale, reliably, was a lot more. The net result of this, along with several other improvements that we made to the auto-scaling algorithm, meant that the scaling operation was a lot more smoother, efficient, and importantly, resource efficient. We're extending some of these core concepts to horizontal auto-scaling as well. Essentially, the goal being whether you have a workload that benefits from more concurrency or just more memory, the service should adapt based on your needs. And we've come a long way in improving the user experience around the cloud console. This is the day one experience for any user starting with ClickHouse. We have an analyst experience with the integrated SQL console, a dashboarding utility, or if you're an operator or an administrator looking to manage all of your services, configurations, settings, or just want to look at your service health, we have all of this baked into the cloud console. And depending on your preference on how you choose to interact, whether it is through an API, programmatically, or automate through the Terraform, or just use the UI, we've got you covered. While we continue to invest and iterate on new features, reliability is an underpinning focus. I spoke to several of you who have been going through the same transition. This is by no means foreign to us. We are making a concerted effort to make sure that we are bridging the gap between the open source and cloud, making sure that the open source release makes it to the cloud as quickly as possible, but we're doing so in a safe and reliable way. We introduced this concept of release channels, which has been incredibly popular. We have a fast release channel, so those that can't wait for the regular fleet-wide upgrade, you want to try your features early, we have the ability to do so with a fast release channel. We'll soon introduce a slow release channel, which is really meant for those users that want a little bit of more time to do testing and hardening before they upgrade their production environments. We also have the ability for users to schedule their upgrades depending on the day and time window during which you would prefer your upgrades to happen. With that, I'll hand it back to Yury to talk about our growth.
Great. We are very grateful to all of our customers who are helping us make ClickHouse more feature complete, more secure, and suitable to more use cases. And this approach seems to be working. Here's the view of the growth of our data under management in ClickHouse Cloud. Thank you. Of course, even the best database in the world cannot address all of your data needs, as much as we would like. It's actually one of dozens or even hundreds of different products, technologies, components within any large big data platform in any organization. So our goal is to just be able to drop ClickHouse into any enterprise big data environment, and we seamlessly integrate with every technology and Mazel tov, and speak every protocol. Over the years, we've added hundreds of different language clients, different plugins, and different connectors. And we're also investing heavily for the last year in CDC, or change data capture capabilities. It already works with Postgres and MySQL, and later this year, we're going to be adding other data sources, such as Iceberg. And speaking of Iceberg, so as Alexey mentioned, we are integrated with all the popular data lake formats, including Iceberg and Delta Lakes and Hudi, and we're compatible with data catalogs such as Unity, Polaris, and Glue. We have a very close partnership with Databricks. In fact, in 2 weeks, we'll be presenting at their Data and AI Summit. So if you're planning to be at that conference, make sure to stop by our talk. Of course, you can't run your queries unless you load data into your database first. So ClickPipes is the data ingestion interface for ClickHouse Cloud. It has a nice UI, lots of other really interesting features, and we are very grateful to our customers who have engaged with ClickPipes over the last year and a half and are using it to load more and more and more data into ClickHouse Cloud. Of course, ClickHouse is a global product. We want to meet customers wherever they are. We're integrated with all the major clouds, including AWS, GCP, Azure, Alibaba Cloud as well. We are currently deployed in 30 different cloud regions all over the world, not including Alibaba. And whether you want low latency or you have to be in a certain territory for regulatory compliance or any other reason, we have a local cloud region to serve your needs.
Looking ahead, we are building towards our mission of building a truly serverless elastic architecture with our cloud offering. And one of the major advancements that I'm pleased to announce is in soon-to-be private preview is distributed cache. This is essentially a low-latency shared layer for instant access to hot data to all replicas. So what this really addresses is the problem with some of the fundamentals of object storage. It comes with several efficiencies with cost and scale, the downside being that it does have a trade-off of latency when it comes to access. That is the very same problem that this project is meant to solve. We are in preview. Please sign up for the waitlist. We have a session later today that goes into a lot more detail. This is a game changer for real-time analytical use cases, as well as the Lakehouse analytics use cases as well. And yeah, this no more cold starts. That's been one of our core missions when we started. We said, okay, this is inching our way towards that mission. And the next feature that is work underway is stateless workers. The idea here, again, is to how do we make ClickHouse more faster, more efficient? And here the principle is being able to offload your compute-heavy operations such as merges and mutations to a lightweight stateless worker node. So you're able to reserve your compute resources for more customer-facing, more critical operations. This just overall improves the efficiency, throughput, performance, and rest assured you're being more resource efficient when it comes to managing your compute. If you have any questions on any of the topics that I presented or anything on cloud, come find me. I'll be around the rest of the day. With that, thank you. I'll hand it back to Yury.
Thank you, Krithika. Of course, we've talked a lot about the ClickHouse open source, ClickHouse Cloud, about ClickHouse as the company, but what is ClickHouse really for? So to answer this question, I'd like to introduce Tanya Bragin. Tanya runs our product and marketing at ClickHouse. And prior to ClickHouse, Tanya spent over a decade in the data space running product for companies like ExtraHop and Elastic. Welcome, Tanya.
Thank you. Yeah. All right. Well, I have the best job of all here at ClickHouse, which is talking to you, our users, to better understand where we should take the product and how we tell your stories. And I just want to first thank all of the users that are here, especially those that have worked with us on this event. And throughout the rest of the sessions, you'll hear not only from me and from us, but from users that are running ClickHouse at scale and solving real-world problems. And you'll hear not only about successes, but also about challenges. Because let's face it, if you're using ClickHouse, likely you're using it for a use case where no other technology worked. The way we're going to organize the rest of the day, and also the rest of this keynote, is start segmenting all of this usage that Aaron talked about, all of these customers, into use cases. While each of your stories is unique, as a product and marketing team, we have to draw some kind of segmentation through this market so we understand commonalities. So we address specific audiences, specific buyers, specific users. And this is roughly how we break it down. Real-time analytics, we refer to that as customer-facing applications, your use of ClickHouse as a database to build a SaaS service, to build an application for internal users, where usually you're building your own UI. Observability, this is these types of applications and infrastructure supporting it, generating machine data, and that's used by SREs and DevOps to make sure these systems and applications are up. Business intelligence often is, by the way, the same type of data, just sliced differently for business reporting. If you have a SaaS service, the same usage that is important to an SRE from an availability perspective is important to me as a business user in terms of consumption, because usually that's how we price our offerings. And finally, AI/ML, honestly, it's kind of a catch-all umbrella term. There are multiple use cases, and they're often a subset of the previous ones. So we'll cover that last, but definitely not least. So again, real-time analytics, customer-facing applications, typically, when you hear that word, you might think, oh, this is like real-time data. This is like streaming. Not necessarily. Yes, the data should be fresh, but also there has to be a historical component to it. In addition to looking at the most recent data points, I want to run a report over all the data points in history. And this history could go back years, potentially, depending on the use case. And the actual experience should be driven by a database that's very, very responsive. Because as a user, I'm not going to wait for these charts to come back or for this report to come back for a long time. Users are very impatient. I know I'm very impatient when I use products. And in fact, I'm going to make a statement here that real-time applications are truly eating the world right now. So again, I'm a product and marketing leader. I use some of these tools. We use Common Room. We love Common Room. It helps us understand our community. When I'm using that tool, I'm not going to wait for a report to come back. It's running on ClickHouse to make sure it's fast for me and my team. SEMrush, again, happy user of SEMrush for our web analytics, and so on. But then there's other whole industries and product categories built on ClickHouse. E-commerce and retail, similarly, applications need to be fast and up to date for customers that you see here. Observability, vendors build on ClickHouse, and then we'll talk about how also teams within companies do the same. Cyber, this is a whole industry. We'll hear from Exabeam, one of the leaders in the cyberspace, about their use case, but there are many others, including in the room here. They're building on ClickHouse to make sure that their users of their cyber products have a fast experience when they look at huge amounts of security data. Finance, media and entertainment, logistics and IT, these are whole industries that are built on analytical data sets. And last but not least, AI/ML. This is an industry being born right in front of us. And there are so many innovators out there that have to deal with huge amounts of data, and they have to solve problems that nobody has solved before. So without further ado, I actually would like to invite one of these users. We actually have several of these users going to be speaking in some of the deep dive sessions, but one of these users is going to come on stage right now. And I would like to welcome Lukas, CEO of Weights and Biases, which is a company that we've been working with for a long time. And let's hear from him, what they're doing and how they're using ClickHouse.
Thank you. Is this on? Did I mess it up? Sorry. Awesome. So I'm Lukas. I'm the CEO and one of the co-founders of Weights and Biases. I don't think you're exactly our audience, but are there any Weights and Biases users in the crowd? Anyone? Yes. All right. Appreciate you. So we set out to build the best developer tools for AI. And I feel like this might be some kind of like caricature of a startup these days, right? developer tools got hot. AI obviously got incredibly hot. But when we did it, developer tools seemed like a small market when we were setting out, and AI seemed like kind of a science project. This is only 7 or 8 years ago. But we really wanted to support AI. We felt like that's really humanity's last project. And we wanted to specifically do it by supporting the developers out there that were building these AI models and deploying them. And ClickHouse has been a really integral part of our journey, and we really appreciate them. We've expanded to over 1,000+ enterprises, tons of overlap with ClickHouse's customer base. When we started, we thought, we'll just do multi-tenant SaaS, and we learned along the way that we needed basically every deployment type. So I think we use all of ClickHouse's deployment types, I believe. And I thought actually BYOC was some crazy thing that our marketing team came up with, but I guess it was you guys that came up with BYOC. Love it. So we definitely use BYOC. But look, I want to tell you about what we do for all these customers briefly. And I think if you step way back, the issue that we were trying to solve is that AI is easy to demo and really hard to productionize. And now I think like any engineer, especially infrastructure engineers, understand that there's kind of like in any project, you got your first 90%, your second 90%, and your third 90%, right? We all have experienced that in our day-to-day lives. But somehow with AI, it's like even worse. Like I feel like there's a first 90%, second 90%, third 90%. Even then, you're like far, far, far from done. Meanwhile, your CEOs look at this like, hey, this seems done. What's the problem? Why isn't this shift, right? And I think there's something about AI that just makes this already challenging problem in engineering even far worse. And I think if you step back, it comes from the fact that when you're developing software, your code is really your IP, right? All the things that you do, you can kind of walk through them and test them, or almost all the things that you do. When you're developing AI, you don't actually get to touch the code that runs, right? You're basically building on this uncertain platform where most of what you do is actually not building, it's experimenting. You have to try lots of different things and see what happens. And then maybe OpenAI releases a new model quietly with exactly the same name, and all your stuff breaks, right? That's a daily occurrence in AI, right? The continuous integration tests in AI never have a 100% pass rate, right? You have to kind of look at what's working and what's not working and decide if you want to deploy the new model. So this is what we wanted to help with. And actually, it's funny, I think we help. I would almost describe what Weights and Biases is as real-time analytics and observability for AI. So I guess it's no surprise that we like the ClickHouse product. I don't even know what category you'd ideally put us in. We have these two products, Weave and Models. Models is a product for people that are building new AI models, like an OpenAI or an Anthropic or a Meta, or really anyone that wants to fine-tune or do reinforcement learning to modify the actual models themselves. Weave is our newer product, which is for people that want to run those models, which these days is almost any company in the world. And what we do here is we help people see if their model's working or see if their agentic workflow is working. And what that means is you need to, first of all, see quickly overall if it's working, and then also zoom into individual cases and try to debug them. That is the workflow. And it's this iteration speed, which is the core ROI for our customers. How fast can you try something and see if it's working, right? That is the unit of work when you're in AI. It's the experiment time and the feedback time. And so, first of all, people need to be able to evaluate what's going on. So we need to be able to produce these dashboards here quickly and custom dashboards for whatever someone's working on. And these evaluation metrics are constantly changing, constantly getting more complicated. With agents, they're exploding to volumes that we never anticipated. And at the same time, you need to be able to zoom in to individual examples and see what's going on, right? That's the fundamental workflow that we couldn't do without ClickHouse. Finally, you need to be able to evaluate new LLMs that come on board, right? Because every day, DeepSeek comes out, Anthropic launches a new model, OpenAI launches a new model. You need to be able to constantly do this and backtest it on the data that you have. And you need to be able to monitor in production, right? So you do tests at kind of volumes of megabytes or gigabytes, and then you're monitoring production at volumes that are more like terabytes. So that's what our customers need to do. We need to help them collaborate securely We need to help them build guardrails to protect their brand, to make sure that they don't end up in the New York Times because someone asked them a question and they got a weird result. This can happen in so many different ways that you can't anticipate. But fundamentally, no one would use us if you couldn't get started easily with 3 lines of code. So there's so many tools out there to try. We think a huge fraction of our success is in the ease of getting started and actually make it possible to get a meaningful use case going with 3 lines of code. You engineers will totally understand this. There's a huge amount of work that goes into that. So look, I'd love to tell you more about what we do, and we'll be around throughout the day. But I also wanted to say that we feel a real passion for ClickHouse in our company. So there's practical ROI benefits that I can tell you about. I mean, this product that we made would really not work without a database like ClickHouse, right? Because we have to store extremely high volume trace data. We need to be able to surface analytics to our users in real time and also let them kind of zoom in and do fast arbitrary queries over billions of rows. So that's critical for us, and this is the only way we're able to do it. There's also a real cost component for us. So ClickHouse is by far the most effective, basically the cheapest offering. What that means for us is that we're able to offer this to users in ways we wouldn't otherwise be able to do it. Like, it's important for us to have a big free tier for our startup customers that don't get funding yet to kind of get them going. It's important for us to let people try it. This would not be possible without the pricing that ClickHouse allows us to do it at. I'll also say, just as someone I've spent my career making developer tools, and I really love making developer tools. I was thinking a few years about why I like it. I think it actually, if you'll bear with me for a second, it goes back to my grandfather, who was a pattern maker and a machinist, and spent a lot of time in his shop when I was little. And he made these patterns that he'd give to other builders to build casts out of them and make things. And he was so proud of his work because, for his perspective, what he would tell me when I was an impressionable 6-year-old in his shop, he'd say, look, I'm building tools for other makers, right? And if I do a bad job, they're really going to notice. And if I do a little bit better job, if I make my patterns like 1% better, then everything made off of those patterns is going to be better. And that really made a big impression on me. Like, wow, that's so cool to build things for other makers, right? Because if you can, if ClickHouse or Weights and Biases can make all their customers like 5% more effective, that's such a profound impact on the world. And I think there's also a connection that we all as makers have with our tools that's kind of deeper than you'd sort of rationally expect from the ROI. Like, when I look at Weights and Biases users, they like love us in this way that I feel so proud of, a special way, the same way that you might feel about having a good hammer, a good screwdriver, right? You really want a good one, And I think I feel the same way about ClickHouse, where it's like it's not just the metrics that come out. It's like a sense of quality and attention to detail. It's the same way that like right away ClickHouse got in our Slack channel when we started to work with them, like humbly like asking us questions about our use case and like helping us make it work the same way that we aspire to work with our users. So we really love ClickHouse at Weights and Biases, and it's an honor to be here. Hope to meet you all throughout the day.
Thank you so much, Lukas. So yeah, that's a perfect example. Weights and Biases, the charts, these immersive charts that are just so data rich, is a perfect example of a real-time analytical applications. I would put you in the real-time category because for us, we're the infrastructure provider for you. But you see my pain as a product and marketing person. There's no categorization that's perfect at all. We have these conversations all the time. Did Tanya come up with the right categories? Did she name them correctly? It's never quite right. It's okay. What's more important is taking that next step and saying, okay, how can we make the lives of our users in this category even better, even easier? And one thing we've noticed working with our user councils, which we hold in different geographies, and we bring together our cloud users, our open source users for different discussion topics. But one thing we noticed in this category, and you probably have seen this in Lukas's diagram as well, they use ClickHouse not in isolation. They do have other data stores. It could be Redis, it could be MySQL, but one that came up consistently a lot is Postgres. And we would go so far as to say that Postgres and ClickHouse is evolving to be the default data stack. If you're building an application that has both transactional analytical workloads, this is the stack you most likely will start with. But in speaking to our users, It wasn't easy. A lot of them had a need to sync data from Postgres to ClickHouse, and it makes sense because if you have a transactional data store, some tables from there are going to be reference tables in your joins, so how do you do that? And they were writing their own sync processes, or maybe they were using Debezium and Kafka, and that was just a big drain on their operations team. Even if they were running our cloud, that part was not easy, right? And so we sat down and we said, we should make this easier. We should have a turnkey way to do this. We quickly realized we are not Postgres experts. And actually, it takes a lot of Postgres expertise to do this. But we were lucky in that the PeerDB team, which was a local Y Combinator startup, they were building Postgres CTC. And guess which data store rose to the top of their requests? It was ClickHouse. So it was a natural match for us to join forces. And today, I'm happy to announce availability of ClickPipes for Postgres CTC in GA. This is a product that we've been building for now the past year. They joined us last summer, and it's been in private preview, then in public beta. In fact, hundreds of users are now running mission-critical applications with this in place as their sync between these two critical databases in their infrastructure. It's very easy to get started with this. There's observability into what's happening with your sync, and today, it's officially in GA. So if you haven't yet started using it, please do. It's moving hundreds of terabytes of data a month, and it's something that we're very proud of. We're not going to stop there, so do join the real-time analytical deep dive and hear from the founders of PeerDB, Sai and Kaushik, in more detail about this, as well as where they're going with this technology. You might also be wondering, well, a sync. Now you're telling me you're taking data, you're syncing it. Are you just adding it? Is it append mostly, which is what you see in analytical databases? Or are you updating these tables? I heard reference tables. And you're absolutely right. Usually with these types of syncs, you need to execute updates. And the PeerDB or the Postgres CTC technology that I just talked about is actually using a specialized table engine, replacing merge tree, which is perfectly optimized for that. But we recognize an evolving need to execute updates on all engines that we have. And today, I'm happy to announce that we are rolling out a lightweight update capability that is going to enable that. It's going to execute much faster, so your update will no longer require rewriting of parts. It's going to actually write a very small, what's called a patch part, just the difference, and it's going to reconcile that on search. Then you might be wondering, well, is the search now going to be slow? Only marginally. Obviously, we can't bend the laws of physics completely, although Alexey tries every day, I can guarantee you. But the search latency is amazing with this, and of course, in the background, we will be optimizing this data in a much more optimized way overall compared to the more traditional OLAP update process. So very excited about this. Do join the real-time analytical deep dive, which is going to happen right after this keynote. Hear from product managers, core engineers, founders of PeerDB, as well as amazing speakers from Sierra, an agentic startup here, and Exabeam that I mentioned earlier. And they're going to talk about how they're building applications at the top of ClickHouse. All right, so that was real-time analytics, the biggest category. In fact, most of you in the room identified as that use case. The next one is observability. This use case is near and dear to my heart. As Yury mentioned, prior to ClickHouse, I was at ExtraHop, which is a network analytics startup, and Elastic, the company behind Elasticsearch. And there, my role was logging. And the days were very different at that time. Observability was really not a word at the time. Logging and monitoring was really the word. And most of the data, especially logs, was completely unstructured. Text data and solutions like Splunk and technologies like Elasticsearch really made sense for that use case. But over time, as years progressed, observability data got more and more structured. And this is when ClickHouse was open source in 2016, some of my biggest customers started coming to me and saying, you know what, we love Elasticsearch for search and for kind of full text experience, but for all of our structured logs, this technology is just amazing, right? The compression ratios are much, much better. The queries are executing very fast. And in the end, our observability ROI, the cost of observability use case, that storing that data and querying the data, is sometimes orders of magnitude more attractive in ClickHouse. And at that time, it was a fairly unknown technology. Over time, as the years progressed, more and more customers went in this direction. More and more companies that we looked at from an M&A perspective, observability vendors, were building on ClickHouse. So this trend was really clear. So you might be wondering, well, where is this today? What companies are using ClickHouse for observability? And there are many, many companies you will have heard of. And you'll hear from some right now, actually. You'll hear from Anthropic and Tesla in a deep dive session, but for the keynote, I would like to ask the OpenAI team to come up and share their journey. They're a great example of adopting the ClickHouse technology, not only because of the technology, but also because of the power of this community. So Akshay and Poom, please welcome on stage. Thank you.
Thanks, Tanya. I'm Akshay. This is Poom. We're here from OpenAI, and we're here to talk to you about how we are using ClickHouse to scale petabytes of log data. So quick show of hands, who uses ClickHouse for observability? I think about a third of the room. Now keep your hands up if you have petabytes of data in that ClickHouse cluster. And how much of that data is growing by 20+% month over month? Few of you. So this is the scale that we have at OpenAI. In fact, we are ingesting petabytes of data every day. Now, last night, I asked ChatGPT to help me contextualize what this even means. It said 10 petabytes of data is the equivalent of 500 Library of Congress's worth of books. I don't know what that means, but it sounds kind of wild, right? It's the equivalent of 2 billion iPhone photos. So if you're taking a photo a second, that'll take you 60 years, and we're generating this much data in a day. And it'll take a pallet of hard drives to store this amount of data. So the scale is absolutely mind-boggling. So I'll quickly touch upon the business problem and kind of why we chose to use ClickHouse. Poom will then do a technical deep dive in a couple of interesting problems we had to solve, and then we'll go and talk about what's next and what the future looks like. So what is a log, right? I have an example here. Should be fairly familiar to most of you. It has some well-structured fields like timestamp and trace ID. It also has a body, which is just textual data, maybe a status code. And as you can imagine, people will want to ask questions like, show me all the logs for this request ID, or group my logs by this status code, or even here is an arbitrary string, show me all the logs that contain it. So who is querying all of this data? OpenAI is a unique company where we are both a research lab as well as a product engineering org, right? We have a team of researchers who are coming up with the latest and greatest frontier models. We have ChatGPT, the consumer product that all of you are familiar with. And we also have an enterprise API that companies are using to build the future. Our researchers and all of these functions need observability to do their job, right? Researchers need high cardinality traces. They're training billions of models on millions of GPUs and want to know what's going on. ChatGPT is growing faster than any app I've ever seen, and more users means more servers, means more logs, and so our ingest needs to scale. And when you have a consumer app and an enterprise app, SLAs matter, right? And engineer gets paged at 3 in the morning, and something's wrong, and you need to use the observability stack to figure out what's going on. So why did we choose ClickHouse? ClickHouse is open source, so there's no vendor lock-in. We can look at the code when there are issues, right? It makes those things very convenient. It's horizontally scalable and cloud native, which means that it's relatively low operational lift to be able to scale it with both ingest as well as queries. It has flexible indexing support. So we have a wide range of queries, a wide range of use cases. We can turn on the indexes that matter and make queries fast. We can turn off the indexes that make ingest slow. And that flexibility is really important to being able to scale this thing. It's a SQL database. And our AI models and AI agents know how to talk SQL. So we can integrate AI into the observability stack, which makes for some super powerful features. And it's battle tested for this use case. As Tanya mentioned, and as all of you are familiar with, a lot of our peer companies are using ClickHouse for this exact use case. And that means there's a lot of good support, and it's just the right tool for the job. So with that context, I'm going to hand over to Poom to go deep on a couple of technical problems we've had to solve.
Yeah, thanks, Akshay. Spoilers. Before I go on, I just want to say that a lot of the things I'm going to be talking about today is by our teammate, Dalian, who isn't here because he's on vacation backpacking through Europe. But with that said, let's set the stage a little bit. We run a log management system, and that means we have software like Fluentbit running on every machine, tailing container logs and shipping them to ClickHouse. We, at the time, have a single ClickHouse instance with 90 shards, and every shard has 2 replicas. Now, because 80% of our user queries only look at the data generated in the last 2 days, we put that on disk and put everything else in blob storage. ClickHouse being cloud native intelligently abstracts away this tiered storage structure from us, and writers of SQL never have to care where the data lives. So with this setup, things were running pretty smoothly. People wanted logs, and we gave it to them. That is until March 25th of this year, OpenAI launched image generation in GPT-4o, and our users loved it. They were generating pictures of themselves in an anime style, pictures of memes, pictures of the OpenAI logo, but as a steak, pictures of famous events. And personally, I saw one of the biggest user growth I've ever seen over such a short amount of time. And all of our servers were melting. Now, in our side of the house, we saw log volume grew 50% overnight, and we went to bed, comforted by the knowledge that we had 50% headroom in CPU utilization, and woke up having to grapple with the fact that that was wiped out in a single night. Oh no. Well, at this point, ClickHouse is very unhappy. It was giving us out-of-memory errors, replications lagging behind, and all the metrics that mattered didn't look very good. And we know we had to control ingest and scale up ClickHouse somehow. So we did that. We had 2 query replicas. We spun up a third, made it query only so that expensive queries don't interfere with ingest. We got a breakdown of our logs by service, cluster, container names, by every cut we could think of, so we could find things to sample, and we sampled them. But ultimately, that wasn't enough. So we decided to drop onto a machine and started profiling ClickHouse. Now, I know I've been on this slide for a while, but one thing to know is that when ClickHouse ingests new data, it puts rows into groups and builds indexes on each group to speed up future queries. And one common type of index is the Bloom filter, which helps quickly tell if a value might be in a column without needing to scan every row. So if a user says, find me all the log lines for this request, ClickHouse can skip scanning entire blocks of data if the Bloom filter says, this request ID definitely isn't in these blocks. Well, you probably see where I'm going with this. When we got the profile, one stack trace showed up at the top. ClickHouse is spending more than 50% of its time building Bloom filters, and we were very curious. So, and very much we wanted to go and take a look. So we did. What I show you here is the actual source code for ClickHouse in the ClickHouse code base for building Bloom filters. And a Bloom filter is a very simple data structure. It's a bit array. And to add something to it, you hash the element, use the hash to compute the position of the element in the bit array, and then you flip that bit to 1. And well, there are a bunch of places where this could be slow. We have hashing, and we have random array access. But according to our profile, the thing that was slowest was this. A single division instruction that the compiler couldn't optimize away. Now, for those of you who are familiar with CPU instructions, divisions are 30 times slower than additions and bitwise operations. So it's not a big surprise that this thing is slow. What we realized is that we're dividing by the same number over and over again. Every time we add an element to this Bloom filter, we divide its hash by the size of the array. And one cute CPU trick you could do at home is you can approximate divisions with multiplication and bit shifts. As long as you know what number you're dividing by beforehand, you could compute how much you have to multiply by and how many bits you need to shift and get the exact same operation. So we did just that. We made almost a one-line change to this function, patched ClickHouse, and deployed it. And we saw immediately a 40% reduction in CPU usage. And one could also say that this was a time series of my heart rate over the period of that incident. But yeah, well, before Dalian went on his backpacking trip, he upstreamed this change, so this will be available in the next version of ClickHouse. And all this is to say that none of this would have been possible if ClickHouse wasn't open sourced. With this, I'm going to pass it back to Akshay.
Awesome. So yeah, I think that just goes to show that the cloud nativeness and open sourceness of ClickHouse really saved us when we were in a pinch. So what's next? Our work is nowhere near done, right? Hardening ClickHouse, scaling it continues to be a challenge. In fact, concretely, today we very naively fan out queries to all shards. We're kind of hitting the limits of that, and so we need to do better here. I'd actually love to chat with folks if you have experience here and brainstorm how we can solve this at the scale. We're constantly improving the UX and tools we provide in the observability stack, right? We want to build performance monitoring and other things for engineers to do their jobs even more effectively. And we want to integrate agents into our observability stack. Imagine agents being able to handle alerts or diagnose alerts before you even have to, right? So we're kind of building all this, and ClickHouse enables us to do it. So if any of this sounds interesting to you, we are hiring. There's a QR code up here. Feel free to scan it. Poom and I will also be around in the AMA section or wherever to chat, answer questions. So yeah, thanks so much.
Amazing. This is great. And yes, absolutely. Scan this QR code. I mean, this event is not only for you to come hear from us about the technology, it's for you to network, hopefully for you to find job opportunities. And this is why we bring this community together. In conclusion, even if you didn't follow this example of how they optimize this particular line of code, you don't have to, in a sense. This is the power of open source community. With ClickHouse running at a huge scale at companies like Cloudflare, like OpenAI, like many others, and contributing back, that's the part that really matters. You can benefit from all of these contributions. You might also be wondering, well, what if my observability workload is smaller? What if I'm not Cloudflare or OpenAI? Do I still need ClickHouse? Can I still benefit from it? And the answer is yes. No matter how big or small your workload is, ClickHouse is a great store for observability data. But again, as a product person, for me, it's never good enough. And I'm like, OK, how can I make it even easier? How can I make it even better? And again, we talked to a lot of our customers, and we could have gone several directions here. But they said, look, stay true to your nature. You're an open source database. Just add more kind of opinionated open source bits to it and make it even easier to run ClickHouse for observability in open source. And that was something that felt very natural to me. It's something that I liked. And in speaking to our community, we got to know the HyperDX team at the last KubeCon. And that's exactly what they were doing. They were building, at first, an opinionated SaaS service, but eventually an open source stack around ClickHouse. And again, just like with PeerDB, we knew pretty much right away that this team should join us. We had a shared vision. And today, I'm really happy to announce availability of ClickStack, the ClickHouse observability stack that is fully open source, based on ClickHouse as the database, OpenTelemetry, and the HyperDX UI, which is an immersive, beautiful experience on top of ClickHouse. We are embracing OpenTelemetry because, as I mentioned, this is a great source of structured observability data. But of course, we're compatible with many shippers, right? And really, this is just a template for you to deploy ClickHouse in this way. We're going to have a deep dive on observability, where you'll hear from the HyperDX founder, Mike Shih. You'll also hear from our internal observability team that's running this stack at a huge scale, a multi-petabyte scale, and also, as I mentioned earlier, from Anthropic and Tesla. Data warehousing. I was at a dinner last night, and a few of you approached me and said, Tanya, we keep hearing about ClickHouse, maybe replacing Snowflake and the like. Is it true? Can you do this? And the answer is absolutely yes. The data warehousing space is evolving very, very rapidly. Since the cloud data warehouses have been introduced, I like to say that a lot of the data that traditionally was kind of locked away in very proprietary systems started to get democratized. And a lot more experimentation started happening with this data. A lot more engineers could get access to it. And now what's really happening is there's kind of the great unbundling and kind of the move away from a vertically integrated data warehouse to a much more open ecosystem. And it makes sense because this data needs access not only from, say, an analyst building a report, but also data scientists, because there's a need to build AI-enabled applications. Even as somebody, I come from observability, I keep wondering why we even have different stacks between observability and business analytics. Historically, it makes sense, but now, does it still make sense? So there's a lot of very interesting interesting questions that surround this ecosystem. And analytical databases like ClickHouse absolutely play a role. ClickHouse, as Alexey mentioned, is compatible with open data lakes. We're a great real-time query engine on top of data lakes. And as was mentioned, we continue to invest in this. So we'll cover this in the data warehousing deep dive. We'll also cover our advancements here, new product announcements. We're making things faster, of course. It's ClickHouse always. Iceberg Queries joins. I'm not going to give away all of the details, so please join that session to see some of the benchmark results underlying this data. And of course, we continue to invest in the overall ecosystem around data warehousing. And you'll see integrations with data movement, data quality companies, data visualization, actually in the looping slides during the breaks. A lot of the partners that you see here were tightly coupled with in terms of go-to-market because it makes sense. It's something that makes us even stronger in the context of this use case. So yes, don't miss this deep dive. You'll also hear from the amazing Lyft team that has been with us for many years, and they're using ClickHouse for their internal data warehouse, as well as our internal data warehousing team that's been doing some amazing experimentation, not only with ClickHouse for data warehousing, but also agentic interfaces on top of this data. So it's going to be a pretty exciting session. AI/ML, as I mentioned earlier, is really an umbrella term. If you think about it, what is AI/ML? Well, actually, my husband is an AI PhD, and he likes to say that, until sort of like a technology becomes cool, like you call it AI. Well, now AI is cool. Finally, he can be happy. AI is very cool. It's no longer just machine learning. AI is really also eating the world, I would say. There's a lot that goes into building AI-enabled technologies. To build the models themselves, first of all, you need data. You need to explore the data. You need to understand it. Often these are local processes. They're enabled by embedded use of a technology like ClickHouse. Then you have to start training your models. And for training models, you have to store features somewhere. And fun fact, a feature is just a column. So of course, a column store makes a great feature store. And we're used as an offline feature store very often in these training processes. Then you have the actual model. You didn't just train it to sit in a corner, right? You want to run an application on top of it. So you need a way to infer from this model. And again, you need a serving layer. And often ClickHouse is that serving layer. Sometimes also with use of vector search as one of the ways to draw correlations. And finally, you heard from weights and biases about observability. It's ever present. It's huge amounts of data and processes you have to observe and understand. So we continue to invest in this. You'll hear from Alexey as well as Riyad about some of these investments in our AI/ML deep dive. But one thing I just wanted to mention that, of course, probably hasn't escaped anyone in the room is the evolution of AI agents, which don't only translate human language to queries. That's been done for a while, but more recently started evolving into these reasoning and thinking machines. And here you see an example of asking a very general question, tell me about real estate prices in London. And an AI agent can go and actually ask a number of queries related to this question, if it has the business context, and then return not just one answer, but several answers. And what we've really noticed is that these agent-facing analytics use cases require very fast database. Agents can generate queries much, much faster than humans, and for a good reason. They're helping us think much faster, but that means that that database needs to be able to handle the load, hopefully in a cost-efficient way, and hopefully fast, because there's still a human somewhere in that loop. I'm not going to wait for my chat interface forever. I'm going to eventually go get a coffee and forget that I even asked the question. So it needs to be fast. So we've embraced this trend with the publishing of, in particular, MCP, Model Context Protocol. It's made it much easier for us as a data vendor to figure out what to do here. We expose this interface, we make ourselves compatible with agents, all of them, right, that support this. And if that ends up being the standard, that's great. If there's another standard that evolves, we will support it as well. We've released the ClickHouse MCP server. It's open source. Anybody can use it to identify your ClickHouse. And what I'm really excited to announce at this conference is availability of this technology in a hosted way in ClickHouse Cloud. So what you can do starting today is go and ask this question I asked earlier in a screenshot, and ClickHouse will help you think. We'll go through all of the steps of potentially first exploring the data sets that are available, looking at all of the potential dimensions. You never know, like what is interesting. And you can always check every step, right? You can check exactly the queries that are underlying it, each individual step. the data that's coming back to make sure that it makes sense, right? It's very transparent as a process, but in the end, you get an answer back that is not only human readable, but has a lot of depth behind the explanation. And of course, we also are exposing the same capability as an endpoint. What if you want to integrate with your own agents, your own AI technologies? You can do this, right? Just use the endpoint and start building AI-enabled product on top of ClickHouse and on top of ClickHouse Cloud. So you'll hear about this and more, as I mentioned, from Alexey, our co-founder, as well as Riyad, who's leading our AI/ML practice within ClickHouse. This is super exciting, and this concludes this part of ClickHouse for presentation. The rest of our day is going to be organized around these use cases. This is a single-track conference, and so we're all going to be together learning from each other, not only from ClickHouse, but from users in the room.